I never expected my life to change in a split second, but that's exactly what happened the day I found Ethan's phone. It lay there, forgotten on the kitchen counter, a silent witness to the secrets it held. I remember thinking, should I pick it up? Should I look? Curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to take a peek. But as I unlocked the screen, my heart raced and dread washed over me. There it was, an unread message from someone named Mia. My hands trembled as I read the words, each one slicing through my heart like a knife. Can't wait to see you tonight, just us. Those 6 words shattered my world. My mind spun as the implications flooded in. Betrayal, infidelity, a web of lies that had woven itself tightly around the life we built together. How could he do this to me? How could he betray the vows we exchanged so passionately? I felt my heart sink, but alongside the pain, something else ignited within me. Determination surged through my veins. I was no longer just a victim in this story. I could feel a fire growing inside, a fierce resolve that I had never known before. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would not let him take away my strength. As I stood there, phone in hand, I made a silent vow. I will not be the victim of this betrayal. I will become the architect of my own revenge. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and yet it also filled me with a strange sense of power. I would take control of my life, and Ethan would pay for what he had done. But who was I really? I thought back to the woman I used to be, soft, nurturing, and devoted to him without question. I had spent years giving him everything I had, turning a blind eye to the small signs of discontent in our marriage. I had been that woman who believed in love without limits, who supported him through thick and thin. Yet, in that moment of revelation, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The transformation had to begin. I needed to shed the layers of that submissive persona. I grabbed a pair of scissors and snipped off my long, wavy hair. The locks fell to the floor like discarded memories. I rifled through my closet, tossing aside the soft pastels and floral prints that screamed, wife. I replaced them with bold colors and sharp lines that reflected the woman I was becoming, a woman who would no longer be defined by a broken trust. Ethan? He was still blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. I watched him from the shadows, taking note of his routine. I noted the way he smiled at his phone, the little secret glances he stole when he thought I wasn't looking. Each encounter with Mia filled me with a cold detachment. I felt like a spectator in my own life, but I was no longer passive. I was calculating my next move. Yet with each step I took toward my revenge, I grappled with a growing internal conflict. Was I losing myself in this quest for payback? Was I becoming the monster I had always despised? I shook my head, trying to dispel the doubts, but they lingered like dark clouds. I had to remind myself that I was not the one who had broken our vows. I was simply reclaiming what was rightfully mine, my dignity and my strength. As I prepared for the confrontation, my heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. I was ready to stand up for myself, ready to face the man I had once loved with all my heart. I clenched my fists, feeling the fire inside me burn brighter. I could almost hear the echoes of my silent vow in my ears. I would not be the victim. I would rise up, and this time, I would be the one in control. I often find myself drifting back to the woman I used to be. I can see her so clearly, soft and nurturing, with a heart that was completely devoted to Ethan. I remember the way I would smile at him, the way I would make his favorite meals, and how I would wait eagerly for him to return home. I was his shadow, always there. But now? Now, I feel like I don't even recognize that version of myself. It was time for a change. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. "You need to do this," I whispered to myself. The woman staring back looked tired and worn out. I took a deep breath and started to plan my transformation. I headed to the nearest mall, ready to shed the layers of my submissive persona like a snake shedding its skin. The first stop was a small boutique. I walked in and felt a rush of excitement. I picked out a few outfits that screamed confidence: a fitted blazer, a bold red dress, and some sleek high heels. Each piece was a step towards the new me, the woman I was determined to become. This is just the beginning, I thought as I paid for my new clothes. With my new wardrobe in tow, I started to change my appearance. I decided to get a haircut that framed my face perfectly and added a touch of color that made my eyes pop. As I watched the stylist snip away, I felt lighter, almost as if I was shedding not just hair, but the weight of my past. "You look amazing," the stylist said with a bright smile. I smiled back, feeling a surge of confidence. I returned home and stood in front of the mirror again, this time with a smile that matched my new look. I felt powerful. I was no longer just Ethan's wife. I was becoming something more. I watched him as he went about his routine, his obliviousness painfully obvious. He had no idea about the changes I was making, how I was slowly reclaiming my identity. I noticed the way he would leave the house, phone in hand, a smile on his face that was meant for someone else. "Look at you," I murmured to myself, "living in your little world." I felt a cold detachment wash over me. I was no longer hurt. I was ready to learn. Every time he left, I made a mental note, counting the moments he spent away from home, counting the moments he spent with her. Yet, as I plotted my revenge, there was a voice in my head that nagged at me. Am I losing myself? I wondered. I had been so focused on getting back at him that I feared I might become someone I wouldn't recognize. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into space. What if I become like him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. But the thought of being a victim again was unbearable. I won't let that happen, I told myself firmly. I will control this. I will be the architect of my own fate. I needed to remind myself why I was doing this. Ethan's betrayal had shattered my trust, but it also ignited a fire within me that I never knew existed. I decided it was time to take action. I reached for my phone and sent a quick message to my best friend, Lily. Can we meet? I need to talk. Just a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her enthusiastic reply. Of course, coffee tomorrow. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I was ready to embrace this new chapter of my life. I was transforming, and with that transformation came a sense of empowerment. I would not let my past define me. Tomorrow, I would share my journey with Lily, and together, we would navigate this new path. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of anticipation wash over me. The woman I used to be was fading, but a stronger, bolder version was emerging. I was ready for whatever came next. The rain poured down heavily, creating a rhythm that matched the storm brewing inside me. I stood in front of the mirror, taking one last look at my reflection. The woman staring back was no longer the soft, devoted wife Ethan had known. I had transformed, both inside and out. Tonight was the night I would confront him. My heart raced, but it was no longer out of fear. It was out of determination. As I drove through the streets, the wind howled, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I parked in front of our house, the place that had once felt like a sanctuary, but now felt more like a prison. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my resolve. This was it. I was ready to face Ethan and the truth. I stepped inside, the door creaking as I opened it. The house was dimly lit, and I could hear Ethan's voice coming from the living room. He was talking to someone on the phone, his tone light and carefree. It made my blood boil. I silently moved closer, listening to his words. Yeah, I'll be there in a bit. Just need to finish up here, he said, laughter bubbling in his voice. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger rise within me. How could he sound so happy when he was betraying me? I cleared my throat, stepping into the living room. Ethan looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion. "Hey, you're home early," he said, trying to mask his unease. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but the storm inside me raged on. He dropped the phone onto the couch, his eyes narrowing. "About what?" he asked, feigning ignorance. I could see the flicker of worry in his eyes, and it only fueled my fire. "About your little secret," I replied, crossing my arms. The tension in the room thickened, and I could almost taste the fear radiating from him. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I continued, "I found your phone. I saw the message." The words hung heavily in the air. I watched as realization washed over his face, his skin paling. "Which message?" he stammered, but I could see he knew exactly what I meant. "The one where you tell her you can't wait to see her again. The one where you talk about our life together as if it's a game," I said, my voice rising with each word. "You think I didn't notice? You think I was blind?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You lied to me, Ethan. You built a web of lies, and I'm not going to let you spin it anymore." His expression shifted from shock to anger. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my heart pounding. "You think you can have it all. You think you can betray me and come home like nothing happened." Ethan stood up, pacing, his hands running through his hair. "You're making this into something it's not. It was just a fling." I scoffed, anger bubbling to the surface. "Just a fling? You call that love? You have no idea what love is. I gave you everything, and you threw it away for a cheap thrill." His eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. I was standing my ground. "You can't just walk away from this," I said, my voice low but fierce. "You need to face what you've done." For a moment, silence enveloped us. The storm outside raged on, but inside, a different storm brewed, one of truth and confrontation. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" I took a step closer, my heart racing. "I want you to feel the weight of your betrayal. I want you to see how it feels to have everything you thought was perfect come crashing down." As I watched his panic grow, I felt a rush of victory. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The facade of our perfect life was crumbling, and I was here to witness it. "I want you to know that this is just the beginning," I said, my voice steady. "You will regret this, Ethan. You will see the consequences of your actions." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This confrontation was only the first step, but it felt monumental. As I turned to leave, I knew this was just the beginning of my journey. I was no longer the victim. I was ready to reclaim my life and my power. After the stormy night of confrontation, my mind raced with thoughts of how to take control. I felt a mix of anger and excitement. I was no longer the soft woman who had stood by Ethan. Now, I was ready to become the architect of my own revenge. I needed a plan. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, the same one I used to jot down grocery lists and reminders. Now, it would hold something much darker. I wrote down every detail I could remember about Ethan's movements. He usually leaves for work at 7:30 a.m., I noted. He meets her at the cafe on Wednesdays. It felt strange to document his every move, but with each line I wrote, I felt more powerful. "Hey, what are you working on?" Ethan asked one morning as I scribbled furiously. His voice was casual, but I noticed the slight furrow in his brow. "Oh, just some plans for the garden," I replied, forcing a smile. It was a lie, but it was necessary. I needed to keep my secret safe. As days turned into weeks, I continued my meticulous planning. I watched him from the shadows, taking careful notes. I observed how he laughed a little too hard at jokes that weren't funny and how he checked his phone more often than usual. Each time he glanced down at his screen, I felt a surge of determination. I was reclaiming my life, one observation at a time. I also started to execute small acts of revenge. Nothing too big, just little things that would chip away at his confidence. When he left his gym bag in the living room, I took the opportunity to spill a bit of his protein powder on the floor. It wasn't much, but when he found it, the look on his face was priceless. "Did you see this mess?" he exclaimed one evening, his voice rising in frustration. "Must have been the cat," I said, trying to stifle a smile. Inside, I felt a thrill. I was no longer the victim. I was in control. However, with every small act, my internal conflict grew. Was I justified in doing this? Was I becoming the very monster I once despised? I often found myself staring into the mirror, searching for the woman I used to be. "Am I really doing the right thing?" I whispered to my reflection. One night, I decided to confront these feelings head on. I sat on the edge of my bed, the moonlight spilling through the window. I took a deep breath and called my friend Sarah. She had always been my voice of reason. "Sarah, I'm scared," I admitted when she answered. "I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this." "Revenge can be a slippery slope," she replied gently. "Just make sure you don't lose sight of who you are in the process. You're better than this." Her words made me pause. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of gratitude and confusion. I knew she cared, but I also felt a fire inside me that I couldn't ignore. I needed to see this through. The next day, while Ethan was at work, I decided to take my plan a step further. I gathered all the evidence I had collected and created a timeline of his betrayals. I wanted to be prepared for the next confrontation. The thought of seeing the shock on his face again filled me with a sense of accomplishment. As I compiled the information, I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was my life, my story, and I would not let him dictate it any longer. However, I also realized that this path was dangerous. I had to tread carefully. Each small victory came with the weight of my conscience. Was I really doing this for myself, or was I just trying to inflict pain? That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, grappling with my thoughts. "What have I become?" I whispered into the darkness. But deep down, I knew I was no longer just a victim. I was a woman on a mission, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The days after my first confrontation with Ethan were filled with tension. I could feel the shift in the air, like a storm brewing. I watched his every move, noting the confusion etched on his face. He was starting to realize that something was off. I could see it in the way he looked at me, his eyes searching for the woman he once knew. But that woman was gone. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, Ethan walked in. He paused, his brow furrowed. "You've been acting strange, Sarah. Is everything okay?" His voice had a hint of concern, but I could sense the underlying fear. I put my phone down and turned to him, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" I asked, giving him a small smile. "I'm just busy with work. You know how it is." He studied me for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "No, it's more than that. You seem different." I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction at his words. I was different. I was stronger. But I played it cool. "Maybe I'm just finding myself again," I replied, my tone light. "I think it's good for me." His eyes narrowed, and I could almost hear him connecting the dots. Finding yourself? Or hiding something? That was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Ethan, let's talk." He stiffened, and I led him to the kitchen. I pulled out a folder from under the table, filled with evidence of his betrayals, photos, messages, everything I had gathered. I laid it all out in front of him. "Look at this," I said, my voice steady. "You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? All those late nights and secret texts. You thought I was blind." He paled, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Sarah, Save it, I interrupted, my voice rising. You don't get to explain yourself. Not now. You've hurt me, and I deserve to know the truth. Who is she? He hesitated, his defenses crumbling. It's not what you think. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Break my heart? Lie to me? I shook my head, feeling the anger surge through me. You've been living in a fantasy, Ethan, and now I'm done playing the part of the perfect wife. His expression was a mix of shock and fear, and for a moment I savored the sight. This was my victory. You're not the woman I married, he whispered, his voice barely audible. No, I'm not, I replied, my tone cold. I'm stronger now. I found my voice, and I'm not afraid to use it. The realization hit him hard, and I could see the panic in his eyes. Sarah, please, I can fix this. We can work it out. I folded my arms, shaking my head. You don't get to decide that anymore. This is not about fixing anything. It's about accountability. You need to face what you've done. He looked defeated, his shoulders slumping. I had never seen him like this, and part of me felt a twist of satisfaction mixed with sadness. I'm sorry, he murmured, but the words felt empty to me. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, my voice firm. You've shattered our life together. I won't let you manipulate me anymore. The air was thick with tension, and I watched as he crumbled before me. The man who had once held all the power in our relationship was now at my mercy. It was a bittersweet victory, but I felt a rush of freedom. As I turned away, I felt the weight of the emotional cost settling on my shoulders. I had taken my revenge, but I also realized that this was just the beginning of my journey. I would reclaim my life, piece by piece, and I would not allow myself to drown in the pain of betrayal. Goodbye, Ethan, I said softly, knowing that I was finally taking control of my own story. The days after my confrontation with Ethan felt surreal. I had taken back a part of my life that I thought I had lost forever. As I sat in my favorite armchair, sunlight streaming through the window, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the sun fill me with hope. I can do this, I whispered to myself. It was a promise, a reminder that I was not defined by what had happened. I decided it was time to focus on myself. I reached out to Lisa, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey Lisa, it's been too long. Do you want to grab coffee this weekend? I said, my heart racing a little. I had missed this connection, this laughter. Absolutely, I can't wait to catch up, she replied, her excitement spilling through the phone. I smiled, feeling a spark of joy. That Saturday, as I walked into the cafe, I felt butterflies in my stomach. Lisa stood at the counter, and when she turned to see me, her face lit up. Wow, you look amazing, she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. Thanks. I've been making some changes. I never expected my life to change in a split second, but that's exactly what happened the day I found Ethan's phone. It lay there, forgotten on the kitchen counter, a silent witness to the secrets it held. I remember thinking, should I pick it up? Should I look? Curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to take a peek. But as I unlocked the screen, my heart raced and dread washed over me. There it was, an unread message from someone named Mia. My hands trembled as I read the words, each one slicing through my heart like a knife. Can't wait to see you tonight, just us. Those 6 words shattered my world. My mind spun as the implications flooded in. Betrayal, infidelity, a web of lies that had woven itself tightly around the life we built together. How could he do this to me? How could he betray the vows we exchanged so passionately? I felt my heart sink, but alongside the pain, something else ignited within me. Determination surged through my veins. I was no longer just a victim in this story. I could feel a fire growing inside, a fierce resolve that I had never known before. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would not let him take away my strength. As I stood there, phone in hand, I made a silent vow. I will not be the victim of this betrayal. I will become the architect of my own revenge. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and yet it also filled me with a strange sense of power. I would take control of my life, and Ethan would pay for what he had done. But who was I really? I thought back to the woman I used to be, soft, nurturing, and devoted to him without question. I had spent years giving him everything I had, turning a blind eye to the small signs of discontent in our marriage. I had been that woman who believed in love without limits, who supported him through thick and thin. Yet, in that moment of revelation, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The transformation had to begin. I needed to shed the layers of that submissive persona. I grabbed a pair of scissors and snipped off my long, wavy hair. The locks fell to the floor like discarded memories. I rifled through my closet, tossing aside the soft pastels and floral prints that screamed, "wife." I replaced them with bold colors and sharp lines that reflected the woman I was becoming, a woman who would no longer be defined by a broken trust. Ethan? He was still blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. I watched him from the shadows, taking note of his routine. I noted the way he smiled at his phone, the little secret glances he stole when he thought I wasn't looking. Each encounter with Mia filled me with a cold detachment. I felt like a spectator in my own life, but I was no longer passive. I was calculating my next move. Yet with each step I took toward my revenge, I grappled with a growing internal conflict. Was I losing myself in this quest for payback? Was I becoming the monster I had always despised? I shook my head, trying to dispel the doubts, but they lingered like dark clouds. I had to remind myself that I was not the one who had broken our vows.